So my next guest is Bill Pieper, and he has been involved in death and dying issues for several decades, has an interesting background, and is currently doing something very important. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ivy.
So tell us just a little bit about your decades of work leading up to what you're currently doing.
Well, I think I might have been at one point the poster child for American denial of death. But when I reached my mid-50s and saw my mother take a sudden and then prolonged turn into dying, it hit me in a way that I could no longer deny that this too was going to occur to myself and everyone else I know, and so it was time to just sort of embrace it and get real. So having done that, I did a number of things. First of all, reading, I joined the Compassion and Choices organization, which in those days was known as the Hemlock Society and sounded rather more dire, but its mission is essentially the same as it is now, to promote acceptance of and control over patient autonomy in the face of death. And that's what we do. And at this point, I'm now the Sacramento area team leader for the Compassion and Choices effort in trying to pass the bill that was mentioned earlier, SB 128, which we call the California End-of-Life Options Act. So it has a little different name than the law that was put in by initiative in Oregon, but it's still essentially the same. It's heavily modeled on the successful Oregon experience, and it right now is yet to have its first committee hearing on the Senate side in the California legislature. But the bill is drafted, it's introduced, and many of you have read about it, I'm sure.
And one of the things that I know you are very active in right now is traveling about the state and educating, perhaps in addition to the public agencies, on what this bill is all about?
Yes, although I don't have a statewide charter. I'm the Sacramento region, and I would dare say that here in the Grass Valley, Nevada City area, you could use your own chapter, and we would be happy to find somebody to lead it and deputize somebody, because this is an area where I know lots of people and I spend time, but I would be spread way too thin to try to do anything here on the scale that I'm doing in Sacramento.
Well, we will definitely include, as the show wraps up later, resources and web links that people can go to, because I know you need a lot of volunteers. When is this bill scheduled to be heard?
The first hearing would be in the Senate Health Committee, and that's on the morning of March 25, which I believe is a Wednesday morning. And I know I will be front and center, and it's not certain yet who will be testifying for and against, but that will emerge as the date approaches, I think.
Okay. We only have a couple more minutes, but if you could just give our viewers a little quick thumbnail sketch of the Oregon model that you said this one is based on, just what that looks like.
Okay. In Oregon, by initiative in the late 90s and after court challenges, etc., a law that they call the Death with Dignity Act was passed up there. It has 17 years worth of experience, and it addresses the most dire cases of people like Brittany Maynard, who not so long ago migrated from California to Oregon because she had an incurable and really dreadful sort of a brain tumor that would have left her probably not, her pain would have been intractable to most pain control methods, and with no life that she could conceive of living. That is exactly the type of case for which the Oregon law is designed. So it involves a person who is diagnosed as terminal, 6 months or less to live under normal circumstances, and this diagnosis has to be confirmed by 2 physicians, and then later in writing by the person And then their treating physician would be able to write them a lethal prescription. It's usually some form of Nembutal, and then they fill the prescription, and at a time of their own choosing, they can self-administer. The physician does not administer the dose, anything of that sort. And Oregon keeps very careful stats on their law, which has been an important resource to those of us following it. So I can tell you that of the roughly 9,000 deaths or so per year in Oregon, less than 1/2% of these would have anything to do with the Oregon law. And within that 1/2% would be all of the people who have requested and been granted prescriptions, and then of those who received the prescription, only about 2/3, or that would be 0.3%, ever actually end their lives by actually taking the dose. It's universally reported that patients really appreciate having control. If their situation does not worsen to the degree that they feared, they don't take the prescription. And there's no requirement.
But knowing that they have that option allows them.
That's the key thing.
Yes.
And the California law would parallel that in every respect. A law similar to it was enacted in Washington and more recently in Vermont. We don't really have experience from Vermont. But Washington's usage stats and everything else are tracking very close to Oregon's. So I think we could realistically assume that that would be true in California. It's for rare and really difficult cases. We have many, many other options to deal with death. People were talked about hospice care and so on here this morning. This would add another option for the really intractable cases. And I am completely committed to seeing it happen by one means or another in our state.
Yes, your dedication is very obvious, Bill, and this is so needed. It's a small step in the right direction. I think that there's probably over time going to be more options that come into this death as an option.
I hope so too.
But we can't go there right out of the gate. It's got to build.
And this really plays into your larger topic here too, Ivy, I think, because when we recognize that these situations exist and we address them, we bring this out of the shadows, because there is a huge sort of gray market or dark side of underground euthanasia everywhere in this country, because it's not a legal regulated option. So, I mean, I personally know of 3 people who have done extra legal things to spare the suffering of a loved one in their family, and in one case even leading to a prosecution. So if I know 3 people, probably many of the rest of you everywhere know 3 people. Well, it's a big deal, and it needs to be brought out of the shadows, and that will help with the overall acceptance of death, I would say.
I would agree wholeheartedly. Bill, you deserve an hour on your own, but we're going to need to wrap it up. I have several other guests, each of whom has a particular focus, but thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
For coming and joining us today.
Thank you for doing this. This is greatly needed everywhere, I think.
Yes, and that's why, recording it and putting Death at the Fuki up on YouTube. Hey, such a deal. So, Death at the Fuki will proceed. We'll have another guest coming on here shortly. And again, I'm Ivy Cohn. My guest has been Bill Pieper.